Hozong Savings Bank, Gyeonggi Province Branch 2. Before the business started, branch manager Park Jun-sang gathered the staff for a morning meeting. As you all know, our branch is lagging significantly in bond sales compared to other branches. What would happen if the sales performance of our branch, which has history and tradition, falls behind a newly established branch that opened last year? The sales are poor. Remember that it negatively affects everyone's performance evaluations. The more we sell, the better the bonuses. Our branch gets recognized as an excellent branch and promotions happen faster. Once he started speaking, it seemed like he wouldn't stop. The ongoing nagging made the staff's expressions grow increasingly grim. After delivering a lengthy speech, Manager Park pointed to a staff member. Kim Myung, please come forward. A woman in her mid-20s stepped forward. Here, Kim Myung achieved the top sales performance last month. Let's give her a round of applause. Clap, clap, clap. The staff clapped unanimously and she shyly bowed her head. This time he called out another staff member. Haeun-ji. Yes. A woman in her mid-30s with glasses raised her head sharply. Haeun-ji, your sales performance is last. What on earth are you doing at the counter? Stop using your phone during work hours and think about how to sell good products to customers. Do you think the bank pays you to use your social media? As the branch manager pointed this out, her face turned bright red. Haeun-ji spoke defensively. I keep encouraging people, but everyone says they don't know much about bonds and aren't interested. Manager Park responded with frustration. So don't waste time explaining what bonds or subordinated bonds are. Just promote it as a product that offers high interest rates. The interest rate is a whopping 5.6%. In today's world, you won't find a product offering this kind of interest anywhere else. Of course, it's not a deposit, it's a subordinated bond. Haeun-ji held back her desire to speak out. I'm sure you're aware that several banks are restructuring and offering voluntary retirements. It's not impossible for us to end up in the same situation, so everyone stay alert. The expressions on the employees' faces darkened further. However, branch manager Park Jun-sang remained unfazed and raised his hand. Alright, then let's kick off today with energy. We're partners in this together. As he led the chant, the employees raised their hands in unison and shouted, Hozong Savings Bank. 9 a.m. The business day began. Being a local savings bank, most of the customers were familiar faces rather than new ones. Number 3, please. A hunched-back grandmother with white hair approached the counter, holding her ticket. Haeun-ji bowed her head and greeted her. You're here, Grandma Kim. Oh my, has my Yoonji been well all this time? Kim Soon-rai was a loyal customer who had been using the same branch for decades. She often shared the story of how she came carrying her baby on her back when the branch first opened, eager to receive a free ramen and toilet paper when she opened her account. What brings you in today? Kim Soon-rai proudly replied, the savings account I opened before has matured. Haeun-ji feigned surprise even though she already knew. Oh my, is it already time for that? You told me back then that you'd be dead before the maturity date, so what savings account? That was just talk. It's not like the old lady dying is a new thing, is it? I told you so. You did well to open that account back then, didn't you? Yes. What would I have done if I hadn't listened to you, Yoonji? Please hand me your passbook, seal and ID. Kim Soon-rai carefully pulled out her passbook from her heavily wrapped waist. Here you go. I brought the one for my husband as well, so can you check how much it is? Haeun-ji quickly typed on her keyboard. If we combine both accounts, the total including interest comes to 86,436,351. Upon hearing the amount, Kim Soon-rai beamed with joy. Oh my. At this rate, I might just make it to 100 million before I die. It's matured so you can come by any time. How can I assist you? I was thinking of rolling this into a deposit and setting up a separate savings account. Are there any good deposit products available? Haeun-ji handed over the product brochure that she had placed in the most visible spot. There's a product with a very attractive interest rate. It's a subordinated bond. Kim Soon-rai waved her hand dismissively. I don't understand those things. I'm just going to deposit my money. I told you before, my husband lost everything in stocks during the IMF crisis and even accumulated debt. I won't even look at those options. A deposit is the best. Haeun-ji considered closing the brochure but recalled the branch manager's nagging from that morning. If she didn't make a sale today, the same thing would happen tomorrow morning. She hesitantly changed her approach. This product is almost the same as a deposit but offers a much higher interest rate. How much higher? Our bank's highest rate right now is 3.1%, but this product offers a whopping 5.6%. Everyone is going for this one. Upon hearing that, Kim Soon-rae's eyes widened. Oh my, is it really that much? In her younger days, a 10% interest rate was normal, and just after the IMF crisis, rates even reached 20%. But those were all in the past. Nowadays, it's hard to find banks offering 3%. It can't just be a higher interest rate for no reason. That's what makes it a good product. With continued persuasion, Kim Soon-rae's resolve began to waver. The final statement was decisive. Would I really recommend a bad product to you, mother? I'm just trying to help you get more for money. Of course. I know you're thinking of me. Kim Soon-rae made her decision. Should I get one for myself and one for my husband? Savings banks protect up to 50 million won per person, including principal and interest, but bonds are not covered by deposit insurance. Therefore, diversifying names would be pointless. Ha-eun-ji didn't bother explaining that fact. Our bank won't have any problems within 3 years. Of course. I'll take care of that for you. She quickly divided the 43 million won into 2 accounts to purchase bonds. Even though they were family, opening an account in someone else's name is illegal, so by the rules the person must come in person. But if that happened, there was a risk they might change their mind. After all, they knew each other well. The subordinated bonds were issued similarly to a bank book, with dates and amounts printed just the same. The only difference was a small label that said, subordinated bond on one side. Since it totals 86 million won, after deducting the interest income tax, you'll earn about 4.07 million won a year, roughly 1 million won each quarter. You won't be able to withdraw the principal for 3 years, but the interest can be accessed whenever you wish. Kim Soon-rae couldn't hide her joy upon hearing the interest. 1 million won every 3 months. I'll hit 100 million in no time. Absolutely. As Kim Soon-rae stood up and thanked her, firmly holding her hand, Ha-eun-ji felt a sense of pride watching her grandmother's happy expression. Customer number 25. This time, a neatly dressed elderly gentleman with a top hat sat down. Ahem, I've come into some money recently and wanted to make a deposit. If I put in 50 million won, how much interest will I earn? She beamed and replied, Sir, deposits are good, but we have a special product issued by our bank this time. Hosong Savings Bank Chairman Min Jongju. He held a management philosophy that one should row the boat when the tide rises. Until now, the waters had not risen enough to row, but conditions changed when his nephew's father-in-law entered politics. Park Si-hyung, during his term as the governor of Gyeonggi Province, launched various projects simultaneously. Since Gyeonggi Province didn't have the budget to invest in all these projects, they were all conducted as private initiatives. At this time, Hosong Savings Bank participated as a financial investor, receiving various privileges. Roads were built throughout Gyeonggi Province, tunnels were dug and light rail systems were introduced. If a company invests, it naturally expects to profit. The roads, tunnels and light rail built as private initiatives were all tolled, not free. Whether public or privately built roads, as long as the tolls are reasonable, what difference does it make? However, these tolls were exorbitantly high. High tolls lead to fewer users and, consequently, decreased revenue. Yet this was not an issue. Park Si-hyung guaranteed private operators a minimum income for several decades, and any shortfall was covered by taxpayer money. Regardless of whether actual profits materialized, investors pocketed money every year. It was a business model that was fundamentally risk-free. Later, Park Si-hyung was elected president after his term as governor. At this point, it was as if the tide had not only come in but a favorable wind was blowing as well. Thanks to this, Hosong Savings Bank could grow aggressively by expanding its branch network. Min Jongju was confident that within this year, they could surpass IBS Savings Bank to take the top spot. However, despite this ambition, they were currently struggling with cash shortages. The reason was that they continued to extend the maturity of loans given to special purpose corporations without recovering the funds. To secure long-term funding, they offered higher interest rates than other savings banks to attract long-term deposits and issued subordinate bonds. However, the funds did not accumulate as quickly as expected. Should I increase the bond sales targets assigned to each branch? As Min Jongju pondered the solution, an unexpected report came in. OTK company has proposed to deposit money in our bank? Executive Shin Hyun nodded. Yes, they have made a formal inquiry. How much? First they mentioned 200 billion, but it seems that depending on the situation even more is possible. Ugh. At this point, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the maximum deposit amount for a savings bank. Min Jongju called her younger brother Min Songju, after sending out Executive Director Lee Shin-hyun, and explained the situation. Why would they want to deposit with us? OTK company is comparable to a major conglomerate. There's no reason for them to engage with a mere savings bank. Moreover, they already have a main transaction bank, Golden Gate. Oh Hyunju, known as the third largest shareholder, is the branch manager in Korea. Min Songju had a hunch. I heard that the Financial Supervisory Service is investigating the transactions between Golden Gate and OTK company. Could it be that they're feeling uneasy about something? Because of the FSS investigation. Indeed, while making money, it's impossible to know what kind of illegal activities might have occurred. If the FSS starts probing seriously, they'll definitely find something. Isn't it that they want to bow to our father-in-law but can't contact him directly, so they're asking us to act as a bridge? Kang Jin, who was infamous for his poor relationship with the president. In this situation, depositing 200 billion in a savings bank run by the president's in-law is quite significant. It practically meant surrendering and yielding. Min Jongju burst into laughter. Haha, even the mighty Kang Jin, who is nothing special. Min Songju also smiled. He finally realized how terrifying power can be after being clueless until now. When you think about it, it's remarkable that they've endured this long. They could have simply yielded earlier, believing that a good relationship would suffice. In any case, if 200 billion comes in now, there won't be any liquidity concerns. Additionally, Kang Jin, who is well known in the financial sector as having the Midas touch. If it becomes known that he's doing business with Hozong Savings Bank, the publicity effect would be tremendous. Couldn't we immediately rise to the top of the industry? Should we meet Kang Jin Who? Is there really a need for that? We can just have Ji-jin and Seoul meet with him. Min Songju's words made Min Jongju nod in agreement. That sounds like a good plan. Hozong Savings Bank has a branch in Seoul through mergers and acquisitions. The Gwangwamun branch was larger than most banks. Perhaps thanks to a recent relocation, the interior was as neat as a new house. Increasing the number of branches and hiring staff is an investment aimed at attracting more customers. However, it typically takes some time for investments to turn into profits. With such a rapid expansion, one might expect a temporary decline in financial status, but there was no evidence of that in the financial statements at all. It's quite a mystery. It feels almost like some magic is at play. I sat in the VIP consultation room, sipping the coffee brought by a staff member. Shortly after, a man walked in. He was in his early 40s, tall with well-defined features. He greeted me and offered his business card. Hello, I'm Min Ji-jin, Executive Director of Hozong Savings Bank. I stood up. Nice to meet you. I'm Kang Jin Who. After exchanging greetings, we took our seats. I heard you inquired about deposits. How much were you thinking of depositing? As I mentioned during the inquiry, I'm considering 200 billion won for now. I thought putting in too much at once might make management difficult. It's not necessarily good for a bank to simply gather a lot of deposits. If a bank takes in deposits beyond what it can profitably loan out, it can end up struggling to pay interest. Min Ji-jin's eyes lit up. Does that mean you might be willing to deposit even more? I nodded. Of course. The amount I deposit depends entirely on Hozong Savings Bank's management capabilities. Then I added jokingly, as you know, I have a lot of money. Min Ji-jin burst into laughter at my remark. Haha, of course. It's not someone else but the representative of OTK company. The atmosphere was cheerful. I heard you issued subordinated bonds this time. That's right. I'm considering purchasing some bonds in addition to the deposits. His face brightened. How much are we talking about? I couldn't help but smile inwardly at his reaction. First, Could I receive a few additional documents regarding the financial status and loan situation aside from the publicly disclosed information? I'll review them and determine the range for both the deposits and the bond purchase. Depositing a large amount of company assets makes it only natural to verify the bank's soundness beforehand. I continued speaking to ensure he wouldn't suspect anything. I'm considering an amount up to 500 billion won. If managing it becomes difficult, I won't request any additional interest. At my words, Min Gijin's eyes widened significantly. A deposit of just 10 billion won qualifies as VIP status. Yet I offered an amount 500 times that. Typically, one would demand higher interest for such a massive deposit, but I indicated I wouldn't. I leaned forward and said, I assume you have a rough idea of why I chose Hozong Savings Bank. I hope this opportunity allows us to establish a mutually beneficial relationship. Min Gijin nodded in agreement. I see. I understand your point. I'll organize the necessary documents and send them over right away. Thank you. I'll reach out after reviewing them. I stood up from my seat. Min Gijin also got up and said, I will make sure to relay your message to my father-in-law. I didn't quite understand what he meant by that. Still, I felt like a person who had just heard something pleasant. If you could, I would appreciate it. Thank you for your assistance. Haha, of course. Now that you're our savings bank's top client, it's my duty to take care of you. Min Gijin escorted me to the entrance. Is it all right if we promote this in the media? I readily nodded in agreement. Certainly. It may sound boastful, but I have successfully made many investments until now. The mere fact that I'm dealing with Hozong Savings Bank will serve as significant promotion. I got into the waiting car. Drive safely, CO. The driver Taekyu started the car. Once Min Gijin was out of sight, Taekyu asked, Did it go well? Of course. I dropped a bait of 200 billion won. There's no way he wouldn't bite. Taekyu laughed, finding it amusing. Is this the beginning of a counterattack? After finishing his work, Park Si-hyung received a call from his son-in-law at the residence. He was taken aback by the unexpected news but calmly responded before hanging up. Park Si-hyung sank into the sofa, lost in thought. All this time, Kang Jin-ho's presence had been a thorn in his side. The plans had gone awry because of that guy more than once, and he even had to issue a public apology. Thinking back to that time still ignited his anger. So he came to the Hozong Savings Bank on his own and said he wanted to deposit money? He thought Kang would confront him to the end, yet it turned out this way. In hindsight, this is the norm. When corporations and governments clash, they only bleed each other. Even if one wins, it's just a return to square one, and losing brings immense damage. Has he finally come to his senses? It felt almost like a tooth that had been aching finally came out. By nature, he never forgave traitors. But if the opponent has money, the situation changes. There are always exceptions. From that perspective, Kang Jin-ho is indeed worthy of forgiveness. Moreover, he's entered the automotive industry. Depending on the situation, he could become a valuable partner in the future. Though it's not yet time to fully forgive, since he bowed first, there is a need to show a reasonable degree of magnanimity. First, I need to halt the Financial Supervisory Service investigation. Perhaps eager to accept deposits, the requested materials came in less than a day. Team leader Seo Sang-won promptly began analyzing the data alongside the disclosed information. Can we tell just by looking at the numbers? In response to my question, he confidently nodded. People can lie, but numbers never lie. He really is reliable. It's a stroke of luck that such talent has come to me. It took a whole day to analyze the data. Team leader Seo Sang-won explained it to us with a weary face. As expected, the most problematic area is the Special Purpose Corporation. The total amount loaned here is 5 trillion won. However, among the corporate presidents, there are quite a few with the surname Min. What does this mean? Taekyu said, does this mean the Min family is pocketing everything? Correct. Many of the special purpose corporations have executives who are not professional managers but rather relatives of major shareholders and executives. It's unlikely that proper loan evaluations were conducted in such places. What did they do with the borrowed money? It appears they invested in various development projects overseas. Upon checking, there have been several cancelled or failed investments along the way. What about loan recovery? If loans aren't recovered on time, it must be reflected as losses in the accounts. They have continuously extended the maturity. Then there will be issues with the BIS ratio. It seems they manipulated the accounts to adjust the figures. It's likely they have been engaging in accounting fraud for quite a long time. It's not a case of employing sophisticated financial engineering for the accounting fraud. According to team leader S27, if they had just looked a bit closer they would have caught on. But no one realized it until now. What's ridiculous is that last year, the Financial Supervisory Service conducted on-site inspections and detailed audits of banks and savings banks to check financial soundness. You looked at me and asked, aren't they all civil servants? What were they doing while getting paid? Indeed. Team leader S27 gave a bitter smile. The scale of the bad debt differs a bit from what we had expected. I nodded. You mentioned it was 2 trillion, right? I thought it seemed too large for the amount of bad debt in a savings bank. Team leader S27 shook his head. It's the opposite. There's a possibility it could exceed 3 trillion. We were taken aback by that statement. 3 trillion. Is it even possible for a single savings bank to lose 3 trillion? I'm only assessing it based on the data, so I can't be certain. If I hadn't seen the oracle, I might have thought there was a possibility it wasn't true, but... I nodded again. No, this is sufficiently certain. Although it was still under review, OTK Company's deposit was practically confirmed. Only the question of whether the amount would be 200 billion or more remained. Hozong Savings Bank openly leaked information to the media. Pro-government outlets published promotional articles as if they were just transcribing what they heard. OTK Company, considering 500 billion deposit with Hozong Savings Bank. Largest deposit amount in savings bank history. How did a regional savings bank outperform Golden Gate? Business partnership between OTK Company and Hozong Savings Bank. Is Hozong Savings Bank poised to become the industry leader? Once the articles were published, internet forums buzzed with activity. Doesn't OTK Company operate on a different level than savings banks? What exactly does Hozong Savings Bank do? It's a bank run by the in-laws of the president. It's quite famous in our area. It's the second largest savings bank. They have quite a few branches in Seoul. Is this due to the president's influence? What's with this reconciliation atmosphere? I was looking forward to round 2 of President versus Otaku, but I'm disappointed. Shouldn't we hear from Kang Jin-ho's side on this matter? Media outlets sought confirmation from OTK Company. However, surprisingly, Kang Jin-ho provided a completely different account. After a thorough review of various materials, we suspect accounting fraud and large-scale loan defaults. The exact scale of the bad debt is unclear, but we predict it will be significant. Consequently, OTK Company is indefinitely suspending transactions with Hozong Savings Bank. If you have deposited more than 50 million won in Hozong Savings Bank, we recommend withdrawing any excess amount as soon as possible. According to the Depositor Protection Act, only deposits up to 50 million won per person are protected, nothing beyond that. The evaluation of Kang Jin-ho within Korea has been mixed. Some view him as an exceptional financier or a centuries investor, while others see him as a financial speculator or a swindler. The important fact is that regardless of perspective, no one doubts Kang Jin-ho's insight into financial investments. As a result, no one could ignore the rumors of bad debts at Hozong Savings Bank. Everyone believed there must be a compelling reason behind Kang Jin-ho's remarks. Though the exact reason was unknown, the answer was clear. Once Kang Jin-ho's comments became public, customers began withdrawing their money from Hozong Savings Bank en masse. The internet banking system was overwhelmed by requests for deposit cancellations and withdrawals, causing the website to crash. It appeared that access was even blocked as attempts to connect were futile over time. Those anxious for their funds gathered at various branches even before dawn. 9 a.m. As soon as the doors opened, people rushed to the counters as if in a race. Our savings bank has no issues at all. Please remain calm and take a number to wait. We will assist you in order. Employees, along with the branch manager, made efforts to reassure customers, but to no avail. I want to close my account. I was here first. Stop shoving. Give me my cash right now. Process my request first. With the flood of customers, glass broke, chairs toppled, and chaos erupted. As requests for account closures and withdrawals surged, Money flowed out like the receding tide. Ultimately, in less than an hour after opening, all branches closed and Hozong Savings Bank declared a business suspension. Until yesterday, Hozong Savings Bank was a solid institution. However, a bank run occurred and it suddenly entered a state of business suspension. While the reserve requirement varies by country, it is 7% in South Korea. Even banks with excess reserves rarely exceed 10%. This means that if a customer deposits 100 million won, the bank may have less than 10 million won in its vault. Therefore, if a bank run happens, no bank can withstand it. However, a single remark from Kang Jin-ho initiated a bank run at Hozong Savings Bank. The suspension of operations for the second-largest savings bank in the industry was a major shock. Those who came to withdraw money abandoned both work and home, laying mats in front of the head office and branches, waiting aimlessly. They didn't know when operations would resume but were determined to withdraw their funds as soon as the doors opened. The issue spilled over into politics. President Park Si-hyung immediately convened an emergency cabinet meeting and made strong statements seemingly intended to address the situation. Groundless falsehoods have led to the closure of a solid savings bank. This is a grave criminal act that cannot be tolerated, and the consequences will fall squarely on the common people. The government will conduct an audit of the bank in question and will respond firmly using public authority against those spreading rumors that undermine financial stability and disrupt the financial market. Though not naming anyone directly, it was clear whom he was targeting. His expression and voice conveyed anger, and the atmosphere of the meeting became tense. Economic Deputy Prime Minister Lee Jun-il spoke in a calm tone. The government regularly monitors financial institutions and conducts audits. As a result, no issues have been found. Operations will resume as soon as the financial authorities conclude their investigation, so please feel at ease and continue your livelihoods until then. After the cabinet meeting concluded, in tandem with the Blue House, National Assembly member Choi Myung-hwan of the Korean Justice Party criticized Kang Jin-ho in an agitated tone. Kang Jin-ho has incited public anxiety without providing any evidence, intentionally instigating a bank run. This is typical behavior of a speculator aiming to disrupt the financial market for personal gain. We must immediately detain Kang Jin-ho and thoroughly investigate what options OTK company purchased and where they invested, confiscating any illicit profits and imposing penalties. The opposition party adopted a wait-and-see approach, emphasizing that since most depositors are ordinary citizens, it is essential to quickly assess the situation and resume operations for Hozong Savings Bank. Chairman Min Jong-ju expressed her regret towards customers through the media while pleading her innocence. I want to make it absolutely clear that Hozong Savings Bank has no issues. Our employees are doing their utmost to resume operations, so please bear with us a little longer. I sincerely apologize for any distress we have caused our customers. Subsequently, she filed a complaint for obstruction of business due to the spread of false information, and the prosecutor's office promptly assigned the case, summoning Kang Jin-ho as a suspect. A single statement from Kang Jin-ho caused a bank run, leading to the suspension of operations for Hozong Savings Bank. Depositors were anxious about their savings while those not directly affected watched the situation unfold as bystanders. Oh, it's round 2, the president versus otaku. Was the approach to deposit 200 billion won just bait? It's a fake, you idiots. But why was Hozong Savings Bank's instability pointed out? Because the president's in-laws are connected. His son-in-law is a senior executive there. It seems like they're gearing up for a serious showdown. This is really exciting. But is there any evidence for this? You think they would say something without any basis? That would be a real issue. Why? They could have bought put options. Personally, I dislike Kang Jin-ho, but when it comes to money, I think it's best to follow his words. Kang Jin-ho seems like a fraud to me. I doubt the company will last a few years before it goes bankrupt and he gets arrested. Of course, it's the likes of him who will rush in to buy the stocks he recommends first. Oh, I agree. The area where Hozong Savings Bank's headquarters is located is predominantly represented by the Korean Party, including the mayor, district head, and governor, along with city and district councillors who are mostly from the same party. Out of 12 National Assembly seats, 9 belong to the Korean Party, with the remaining 3 occupied by independents who lost with Korean Party nominations. If Hozong Savings Bank were to go bankrupt due to its instability, the repercussions would be unimaginable. For this reason, politicians including the President, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister of Economy, National Assembly members, and local councillors all rallied together to reassure the public that Hozong Savings Bank is safe, calming the local sentiment. Kim Soon-rai ran a small restaurant in a corner of the market. Every day, rain or shine, she worked tirelessly from early morning until late at night. With the money she earned, she successfully raised and married off her 5 children. Even when the IMF crisis hit and her husband lost all his investments in the stock market, leaving them in debt, she worked hard, paid it all off, and managed to save. However, due to her age, her body was increasingly tiring. She didn't know how long she could keep working. Her remaining wish was to live without relying on her children until her death. Fortunately, she had managed to save a little money, enough to ensure their comfortable retirement. But one day, all of a sudden, Kang Jin-ho pointed out issues with Hozong Savings Bank and urged people to withdraw their deposits. When the news broke, the market was thrown into chaos. Most merchants had deposited their daily earnings in Hozong Savings Bank. Kim Soon-rai, along with the other merchants, rushed to the bank early in the morning. However, a crowd had already formed outside the branch. They desperately tried to retrieve their money, but the bank, having opened less than an hour ago, had already ceased operations. The merchants, abandoning their businesses, anxiously paced back and forth. If the bank collapses, we'll lose all our money. Don't say such unlucky things. No, I'm just worried, okay? While they were worried about what might happen, thankfully the president and politicians stepped in, stating that everything would be fine. Thanks to that, the tense atmosphere began to calm down. At the headquarters, branch manager Park Jun-sang, following orders to distribute numbers to customers for a return, came outside with the staff. He spoke into a megaphone. You all heard the government's announcement. Kang Jin-ho spread malicious rumors and we've only closed for a short while. We will reopen soon, so there's no need to worry. We'll start distributing numbers now, and when we reopen we'll assist you in order based on your number. So please take one and go back. In a situation where they didn't know when the bank would open, sitting and waiting blindly wasn't an option. Though there was a bit of commotion over the numbering, people took the numbers. Kim Soon-rai grasped the hand of Ha Eun-ji, who was distributing the numbers. Eun-ji, is my money okay? That's my entire fortune. Without it, both me and the old man will die. Ha Eun-ji forced a bright smile. It'll be resolved in just a few days. The president and politicians all say it's fine. At her words, Kim Soon-rai nodded vigorously. You're right. Our president is the most esteemed person in the country, isn't he? If someone like him says it's okay, then it must really be okay. Absolutely. There's no need for you to worry. However, Kim Soon-rai couldn't easily shake off her anxiety. So, we don't need to worry about that guy Kang Jin-ho, right? An elderly man nearby shouted as if to emphasize his point. That kid is a total fraud. He makes people anxious with his nonsense and then tries to swindle them out of their money. Everyone around chimed in agreement. He's just a malicious bastard. They say he's been doing this to make money for years. Think about it logically. Would the president let a savings bank run by his in-laws fail? Exactly. Isn't Hozong Savings Bank the second largest bank in Korea? Does it even make sense for such a big bank to go under? That nasty guy is just spreading rumors. The crowd uniformly condemned Kang Jin-ho rather than the bank. The people gathered knew they would be affected if Hozong Savings Bank went bankrupt. Therefore, the president had to be right and Kang Jin-ho had to be wrong. It was more of a hope than a belief. Regardless, as the crowd spoke with one voice, Kim Soon-rai felt somewhat reassured. Park Jun-sang casually said, I heard Kang Jin-ho is coming to the prosecutor's office for questioning tomorrow. One of the market merchants raised his hand and shouted, We shouldn't just stand here, let's go see that guy's face. At his words, the people unanimously agreed. Sounds good. Let's go. How often does a person need to go to the prosecutor's office in their lifetime? This time, it wasn't the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office but the local district prosecutor's office instead. So I had to drive down to be questioned as a suspect. Even though I could go alone, Taekyu insisted on coming with me. On the way, I called my mother knowing she would be worried. Why did you go and make trouble by saying unnecessary things again? Mom, it's not like that. If you just stayed quiet, nothing would happen. Where did you inherit that from? After a round of nagging, my mother asked in a concerned voice, "This time you're not really getting arrested, right?" "Of course not. I'm just being questioned. Just know that if you get arrested this time, I'm going to collapse." "I got it. Don't worry." After trying to reassure her as much as I could, I hung up. You asked, "So, are you really okay without a lawyer? Shouldn't you be gathering a team of elite lawyers like the Chable presidents?" "Well, it's not that serious. It's just that those people have a lot to hide. I have nothing to be ashamed of." As we neared the prosecutor's office, You said, "Looks like your arrival has been made public. Check out that crowd welcoming us." In front of the prosecutor's office, dozens of people had gathered as if in protest, with police controlling the surroundings. The banner says, "Arrest financial fraudster Kong Jin-ho." What the heck did I do wrong? The gathered people are mostly elderly individuals in their 50s and above. They are likely all depositors from Hozong Savings Bank. I can fully understand their feelings. If I heard that the bank where I put my money had closed, I would feel the same way. Lower the window and wave once. Wouldn't I get beaten up for that? As I approached the main entrance, I could hear the shouts. "Punish the speculator Kong Jin-ho. Punish him. Arrest the fraudster Kong Jin-ho. Arrest him." The car drove into the prosecutor's office. At the entrance of the building, a photo line was set up and reporters were waiting with cameras and microphones. "Have a good trip. I'll see you later." I got out of the car and stood in front of the photo line. Click, click. The camera shutters clicked rapidly and reporters bombarded me with questions. "How are you feeling right now? Do you admit the charges? For what purpose did you make those statements?" I let out a sigh inwardly. My face is going to be plastered all over the news again today. I looked at the cameras and delivered the words I had prepared. "I will sincerely participate in the prosecutor's investigation." Just as I was about to enter, a reporter shouted, "Don't you feel any remorse for the victims? At least say a word of apology before entering." It was none other than a reporter from Jungilbo. I stared at him sharply. Why should I apologize? I feel sorry for the people affected by this incident, but the responsibility lies with the management of Hozong Savings Bank, who concealed their insolvency through cooking the books, and the regulatory agencies that failed to supervise them properly. They are the ones who should be apologizing. The prosecutor holds the power of life and death over the accused, the power to indict. Therefore, whether guilty or innocent, one tends to feel apprehensive when coming to the prosecution. Moreover, just like the saying that even a mutt can feel at home in its own territory, the prosecution office is the prosecutor's turf. Conversely, it feels foreign to someone who is visiting for the first time. However, I had already been arrested once before, so perhaps that's why I didn't feel particularly tense. Instead, I felt more annoyed. Why do I have to be here doing this? I was escorted to the interrogation room. The prosecutor's name was Yang Xian-ho, a young man in his early 30s. "Please have a seat." Yes. I sat comfortably in the chair, but then an investigator in his late 40s with a receding hairline snapped at me. "Don't cross your legs. What are you doing acting disrespectfully in front of the prosecutor?" I hadn't intended to be arrogant, but it seems I had unconsciously crossed my legs. I could uncross them easily, but his commanding tone really bothered me. I asked him, "Is there a law that says I can't cross my legs in front of a prosecutor?" What did you say?" "It seems like there's some misunderstanding. I'm not a criminal or a suspect. I'm a regular person here to be questioned. Don't you know about the presumption of innocence? Just because I've been accused, taking time out of my busy schedule to come here for questioning feels like I'm fulfilling my role." The investigator looked astonished. How many sane individuals would act this way if they weren't a serious criminal? Prosecutor Yang Xian-ho waved his hand. "It's all right, investigator. I'll handle this, so please take a seat." "Understood." The investigator returned to his seat, still wearing a discontented expression. "Did you bring your ID?" "Yes." After verifying his identity, the formal investigation began. The usual, expected questions followed, based on the 6 fundamental questions. "Why did you make that statement?" "It's as I said. I was analyzing data to make a deposit, and I suspected large-scale financial issues were being hidden through accounting fraud." "Do you have clear evidence?" "There should be more money going out than is coming in. If the numbers don't add up, Isn't it natural to suspect manipulation? So it's just a suspicion then. It's a reasonable suspicion. Then did you realize your statement could lead to a bank run? It would have been better to say I didn't know. But I nodded. Yes. I was aware. A glimmer of surprise appeared on his face. So you made that statement knowing that? Anyway, Hozong Savings Bank is going to go bankrupt, and they won't be able to return all the deposit money. In the meantime, each branch is happily taking long-term deposits and aggressively selling subordinated bonds. It's better if it collapses now, at least that way we can minimize the damage. Shouldn't we at least prevent further harm? If it's proven to be false information, you will be punished. I nodded confidently. It's only natural to be punished for spreading false information that led to the suspension of a perfectly good savings bank. I'm prepared for that much. But what happens if I'm right? Those who took people's money and provided bad loans, the ones who manipulated the books to cover it up, those who turned a blind eye while profiting and so on. They won't be able to escape responsibility. Of course, neither will Park Si-hyung. Everyone knows that I have a lot of money and a connection with Ronald. Perhaps because of that, the investigation proceeded in a relaxed atmosphere. Unlike my previous interrogations, there were no threats or aggressive attitudes. After 5 hours of questioning, I reviewed the records and stamped my approval. If we need further investigation, we'll contact you again. Yes, thank you for your hard work. As I left the prosecutor's office, an investigator rushed up behind me. Excuse me. Kang Jin-hoo. I stopped in my tracks. Is there still something I need to answer? No, that's not it. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. Not long ago, I put all the money from selling my house into Hozong Savings Bank. But because of me, the bank's operations were suspended, and now he couldn't withdraw his money? At first I was angry, thinking he was just rambling, but throughout the investigation, I had consistently pointed out Hozong Savings Bank's insolvency. Perhaps because he had been listening so closely, his expression was markedly more anxious than before. How much is it? 170 million won. That's a significant amount of money even for those who are well off. For a civil servant, it would be even more impactful. It was probably a lifetime's worth of savings, scrimping on food and clothing. If a problem occurs, how much do you think I could get back? He studied my face with trembling eyes. In his gaze was a mixture of a desperate plea for reassurance and a desire to know the truth. How should I respond to him? Even in the worst-case scenario, you can get back 50 million won. What about the 120 million? You should assume that half of it will be lost. His expression turned pale at my words. He might not realize it, but even this was a hopeful assessment. The chances of retrieving even half of that were slim to none. That's impossible. What kind of scam is this? Seeing his reaction, I sighed inwardly. Pray that I'm wrong. Why should I apologize? Kang Jin-hoo, summoned as a suspect for obstructing business by spreading false information, glared at the Jungilbo reporter who asked if he had any intention to apologize to the victims and retorted, "Why should I apologize?" before walking into the prosecutor's office. During the subsequent 5-hour interrogation, Kang Jin-hoo vehemently denied the allegations but failed to provide any evidence to support his claims. Excerpt. According to the prosecutor's interim announcement, under continued pressure, Kang Jin-hoo admitted that he expected his statements would lead to a bank run. This suggests that his statements may have had ulterior motives. The prosecutors stated they would summon Kang Jin-hoo again for questioning as soon as the audit of Hozong Savings Bank was completed. Take, you handed me the newspaper. The photo turned out great. You should scrap this as a keepsake. The front page of Jungilbo featured a large photo of me glaring at the reporter with the headline reading, "Why should I apologize?" I was at a loss for words. These jerks are unbelievable. Just bear with it. They must be feeling the pain of creativity too. Since when did reporting become an art form? How could they twist it to suit their own narrative like this? I had merely looked over, so what angle did they shoot from to get that? Moreover, the follow-up statement about feeling regret for the victims and that the management and supervisory agencies should apologize was completely cut out. The jjajangmyeon and sweet and sour pork that take-you ordered arrived. I called Senior Sanjiop to the CEO's office, and we all sat down together to enjoy the meal after a long time. Turn on the TV. As soon as I pressed the remote, my image appeared on the screen. Don't you have any remorse for the victims? Just don't walk in without saying even a word of apology. Why should I apologize? Taekyu marveled as he paused from eating jjajangmyeon. Wow. It's a classic scene no matter how many times I see it. Senior Sang Yeep nodded in agreement. I saw that circulating on the internet too. It even made the real-time search trends. I was beyond annoyed. I switched channels. Other broadcasts were also reporting on the suspension of operations at Hozong Savings Bank. The president hadn't mentioned it separately after the cabinet meeting, but the political world was ramping up its criticism day by day. Members of the Korean party took turns blaming me as if passing a rolling paper. Especially, party leader Choi Myung-hwan was prominently featured in various news, loudly proclaiming that Hozong Savings Bank was safe and that the country shouldn't be shaken by a single fraud allegation. Taekyu pointed at the screen, where Choi Myung-hwan was shouting with his face flushed red. Why is that guy overreacting like that? Because Hozong Savings Bank's headquarters is in Choi Myung-hwan's electoral district, I explained. Ah. Senior Sang Yeep added, he's also considered a potential candidate for the next presidential election. I guess he's trying to boost his recognition with this opportunity. Taekyu looked confused. But what if it actually goes under? What's he planning to do? Of course, the president and ruling party didn't make such a fuss out of foolishness. He's mistaking my raising alarm over minor issues as a public declaration. Is there any perfectly clean company? Banks are no exception. There are varying degrees of hidden problems, but they all conceal some level of financial instability. It might be possible to raise issues with just that, but the government is the one conducting the investigation anyway. They are confident they can cover up any significant shortcomings on their end. But what if it's not just minor issues? There's a common sense in the world. Could you even imagine that the scale of a single savings bank's insolvency would exceed hundreds of billions? If I hadn't seen the forecasts, I wouldn't have been so sure. Then couldn't they just announce that there's no insolvency? Sang Yeop Sr. shook his head at Taekyu's comment. But Jinwoo caused a bank run. For the time being, there will be more withdrawals than deposits, and if they try to resume operations, it won't last long before it collapses. News articles continued to flow about Hozong Savings Bank. This time, scenes of people gathering at the bank and the customers' expressions were shown. Seeing that, I couldn't swallow my jjajangmyeon. I put down my bowl and said, I'm not sure if this was the right thing to do. What sin do those people have? They only entrusted their hard-earned money to the bank, believing in it. If I had said nothing, they might have been living without worry. Sang Yeop Sr. spoke up. It was the right thing. Whether it's a bubble or insolvency, if it's going to burst, it's better for it to happen quickly. That's the way to minimize losses, even if just a little. If it's their own money, companies can invest or speculate however they want, regardless of profitability. However, the money that banks lend is not the bank's money, it's the customer's funds. Banks merely act as intermediaries connecting depositors and borrowers. Therefore, when there are insolvencies in loans, it directly translates to damage for the depositors. That's why there are various regulations and oversight on financial capital. Bank loans must adhere to established procedures and regulations, thoroughly verifying business viability and collateral before being granted. But Hozong Savings Bank completely disregarded these processes, created a special-purpose corporation, approved loans, and the institutions that were supposed to manage and supervise them sat idly by. In the meantime, the scale of the crisis has snowballed. Park Si-hyung was unknowingly nurturing cancer cells. And the characteristic of cancer cells is that they kill the host and perish together. As I watched the news, I said, by now they must have slowly grasped the scale of the crisis. Finance is a system built on trust. When that trust collapses and people can no longer trust banks, they all rush to withdraw their deposits. That's what a bank run is. Kang Jinwoo induced a bank run with just a few words. The president immediately classified it as a rumor, then reassured the public and launched an investigation into Hozong Savings Bank. The investigation period announced by the government was 10 days. During that time, the Financial Supervisory Service and the Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation completed intensive audits and field inspections, stating that they would resume operations. Thanks to this, depositors felt relieved and greater chaos did not ensue. This response was commendable in effectively preventing financial unrest early on. The Financial Supervisory Service and the Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation conducted joint intensive audits and field inspections. On the surface, Hosong Savings Bank appeared to have no issues. Deposits and loan interest were steadily coming in and cash flow seemed normal. Some minor problems were visible, but they were within typical levels. Initially, everyone thought the investigation would be completed quickly, and operations would resume soon. However, it didn't take long for them to realize the situation was serious. The accounting figures were completely manipulated. Nothing matched the reality. While high-interest deposits continuously flowed out, loans were not being recovered on time. In essence, they were using new deposits and subordinate bond issuance to pay interest on deposits. If cash hadn't kept coming in, the situation would have been disastrous even without a bank run. To secure cash flow, loans needed to be recovered. Corporate loans and real estate collateral loans posed no major issues. There were some problems with personal credit loans, but the amounts were relatively small, and the ratio was below 10%. The problem lay with the 150 special purpose companies. The total amount loaned to these companies reached 5.1 trillion won. By calculation, this meant an average loan of about 34 billion won per corporation. The loans had been made in an ad hoc manner. The collateral consisted of just one piece of paper, and there were no proper feasibility assessments. The loaned money was invested in various overseas projects, but most suffered enormous losses. There were even places that lost everything by investing in derivatives to cover already incurred losses. Amid all this, expenses were continuously incurred. It appeared as if there was a competition to see who could siphon off money first. The president of the Special Purpose Corporation was a relative of the management team, and those relatives seated their own friends and acquaintances, paying them hefty salaries. The role of the bank does not end with providing loans. They should have periodically inspected and monitored whether the funds were being used for their intended purpose, whether the collateral was stable, and whether any defaults were occurring. However, since everyone was related or connected through mutual acquaintances, they merely received reports and extended loan maturities whenever requests came in. It was impossible to even gauge the scale of the defaults. There were even several entities that had already shut down or were completely uncontactable. The employees who came to investigate gave up their evenings and conducted a thorough investigation of the loans to ascertain the collateral value and recoverable amounts. The results were shocking. Park Si-hyung, after receiving the report from Financial Supervisory Service President Cha Jong-ho, asked again, "What did you say? How much?" Cha Jong-ho repeated, "The amount confirmed so far is 3 trillion won." At first, Park wondered if he had misheard. Was it possible that a zero was misread, turning 300 billion into 3 trillion? How could the default of a small savings bank amount to 3 trillion? Was this even realistically possible? Are you saying 3 trillion won? Not 300 billion or 3 billion, but 3 trillion. Despite the room not being particularly hot, beads of sweat poured down his forehead. Yet Cha Jong-ho didn't even consider wiping them away. Regaining his composure, Park said sternly, "What has the Financial Supervisory Service been doing for it to come to this?" Well, the audits and inspections had amounted to little more than skimming through the ledgers and visiting a few companies that were granted loans. In fact, they were too busy entertaining visitors throughout the audit period. The failure of the supervisory agency to meet its responsibilities largely fell on Park Si-hyung himself. Although Cha Jong-ho had a major in economics, he was an administrator with no relevant experience in finance. However, Park had built a connection with him during his time as the governor of Gyeonggi Province and later appointed him as the head of the Financial Supervisory Service due to his work in the election campaign. Lack of expertise was equally true for the heads of the Audit Office and the Deposit Insurance Corporation. The head of the Audit Office graduated from the same university as the president, and the head of the Deposit Insurance Corporation merely attended the same church as the president. As of now, it's 3 trillion won, but if we include things that haven't even been verified, it could increase to 3.6 trillion. Now he was so astonished that he could barely speak. This was shaping up to be a historic scandal following Daewoo Group's accounting fraud, and it was the largest scale of accounting fraud in a financial institution ever. And this was all accomplished by a mere savings bank, not a general bank or a major securities firm. Park Si-hyung initially thought Kang Jin-woo had finally knelt down when he heard that OTK company was depositing 200 billion won into Hozong Savings Bank. However, Kang Jin-woo struck a blow by exposing the bank's shortcomings, triggering a bank run. Upon realizing he had been deceived, Park Si-hyung felt a surge of furious anger. Hozong Savings Bank was managed by his father-in-law, who had enjoyed numerous benefits during his tenure. If Hozong Savings Bank were to collapse, and any irregularities or corruption were discovered in the process, it would lead to a significant political fallout. Park Si-hyung immediately dismissed Kang Jin-woo's statement as a rumor and tried to reassure the public, confident that he could cover up most issues. But this was already far beyond what could be managed. Park Si-hyung turned to Cha Jong-ho and asked, "What should we do now? Tell me the plan." The method is. Why hadn't he searched for a solution? With such massive financial issues at stake, both the management and the supervising agencies could not evade blame. If they didn't provide immediate financial support, Hozong Savings Bank would collapse within a day. But providing that support meant they needed to disclose audit results, and doing so would lead to the bank's downfall. Thus there was no solution. Cha Jong-ho reluctantly opened his mouth. "I'll look for it." After sending him off, Park Si-hyung sat back down, lost in thought. He had overcome numerous crises in the past. Sometimes he had evaded them with lies and deception. Other times he faced them head-on. Businesses and the media were on his side, while the opposition party was inept. While opinions might differ about whether he was a great president, he had certainly provided clear rewards for his supporters. He had offered various privileges to corporations, pardoned those who supported him politically and economically, removed real estate regulations to raise property prices, and allocated as much budget as possible to districts held by the ruling party. Thanks to this, despite numerous controversies, many citizens still supported him. Many people don't feel directly affected by the government's waste of 10 trillion won in taxes. Issues like media control, parachute appointments, and election interference are primarily political concerns. Illegal surveillance or investigations against civilians don't matter to most unless they are personally impacted. However, losing my own money is an entirely different issue. If bankruptcy becomes a reality, local residents will face direct and significant financial losses. If this leads to a crisis in the local economy, the damage will spread even further. Currently, customers of Hozong Savings Bank are solely looking to the president, waiting for operations to resume. They are a key support base for the ruling party. How did it come to this? The answer is clear. The management of Hozong Savings Bank concealed its insolvency, and the government agency responsible for oversight failed in its duties. However, Park Si-hyung found a different reason. After the earthquake. Given that no one knew until now, it was at least not an immediately apparent insolvency. If it had been hidden well and managed cautiously, perhaps a crisis could have been averted during the administration's term? Yet the whole situation was unveiled by a single comment from Kang Jin-woo. Park Si-hyung gritted his teeth. Did he know this would happen from the beginning? The media plays a vital public role in checking power and fulfilling the public's right to know, but it is, after all, a private enterprise. When the government applies pressure and businesses cut off advertisements, they have no means to endure. From the early days of his term, Park Si-hyung has adeptly managed the media with a mix of carrots and sticks, resulting in most mainstream media becoming loyal mouthpieces for the government. Among these, the Jungilbo has shown the strongest pro-government stance, having a personal conflict with OTK company. Therefore, regarding the current situation, the Jungilbo has framed it from the beginning as a conflict between speculative capital intending to disrupt the financial market for profit and the government trying to protect the public from harm, aligning its articles accordingly. OTK company claimed it had not invested in any derivatives associated with this issue, but the Jungilbo argued that, due to the nature of the company being located in a tax haven, it could easily have conducted transactions through shell companies. In short, the lack of evidence itself is presented as evidence. Next to the article criticizing Kang Jin-woo, there was a prominent advertisement for Hozong Savings Bank, boldly stating, "Thank you sincerely to our valued customers for your trust and patience. We will strive to be a more beloved Hozong Savings Bank." An emergency discussion was organized on TV. The topic was, of course, the Hozong Savings Bank situation. Experts and congressmen from both parties debated fiercely. During this, as the topic of bank runs arose, Congressman Kim Han-cheol from the Korean Party spoke in a firm tone. It's an issue to spread malicious rumors, but it's also a problem to believe and follow them without critical thinking. A bank run is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. A bank doesn't collapse because of a bank run. Rather, it collapses because of the bank run itself. If no one withdraws money, there's no problem, yet problems arise because everyone rushes to withdraw. Congressman Yoon Chan-young from the New Politics Party immediately retorted. What's wrong with a bank run? Banks threaten with collection as soon as loan interest is just a few days late. Yet why is it the customer's fault for wanting their own money back? Is there any bank on earth that can withstand a bank run? Are we supposed to tell banks to keep all the deposited money in safes and not lend a single penny? I agree that no bank can endure a bank run. However, a solid bank doesn't collapse immediately when one occurs. If depositors observe that the bank can still give out money even during a rush, the bank run will naturally stop. Isn't it problematic that they couldn't hold out even for a day before going into suspension? Member Kim Han-cheol exclaimed sharply. Then are you saying, Representative Yoon Chan-young, that Kang Jin-hoo is correct and not the government announcement? Who on earth is Kang Jin-hoo? A young man who hasn't even graduated from college, and people rush to the banks to withdraw money based on his words. It strikes me as quite lemming-like. You know, those rodents that act in groups. Throughout the debate, Representative Yoon Chan-young had been speaking calmly, but for the first time he raised his voice. Are you saying that depositors are lemmings? Is that something a member of the National Assembly elected by the people should say? Realizing his words might have crossed a line, Kim Han-cheol quickly clarified. Oh no, I wasn't trying to belittle the depositors. I meant that the real issue is Kang Jin-hoo who incited them. Then he turned to the moderator with a smile, saying, Please edit this part out when it airs. The moderator looked at him with a bewildered expression. We're currently live on air. The government initially stated that the investigation period would last 10 days and promised to provide an interim announcement as soon as possible. The reason there was no significant chaos despite the business suspension was that depositors trusted the government and the media and chose to wait. However, as a week passed without any news, anxiety began to grow. Market merchants, including Kim Soon-rae, gathered in one place. When will we resume operations? This is strange. Why hasn't anyone said anything? What if something really happens? One merchant spoke up. There's no need to worry. The government has assured they will cover up to 50 million won per person without fail. Then another merchant shouted irritably. Who doesn't know that? But is that really a solution? What about amounts over that? Given that it was a savings bank that had operated in the area for a long time, many people had large sums of money deposited. They were feeling even more uneasy. Park Yong-cheol, who ran a hardware store, tried to calm the merchants. Just wait a bit. The government must be working on a plan. Kim Soon-rae said to Park Yong-cheol. You said you graduated from college, right? Yes, ma'am. Kim Soon-rae showed him her bank book. Then take a look at this. I heard it's similar to a deposit. Can I get compensation for this? Park Yong-cheol took the two bank books and checked the amounts. You split it into 43 million won each. Deposits are guaranteed up to 50 million won per person, so don't worry, ma'am. At that, Kim Soon-rae let out a sigh of relief. I knew it would be fine. That's a relief. Thank goodness. However, Park Yong-cheol's expression hardened as he examined the bank statement. Wait a moment. This is not a deposit, it's a subordinated bond. Kim Soon-rae blinked in confusion and asked, Isn't that the same as a deposit? Park Yong-cheol looked up and asked the merchants, Are there any of you who bought subordinated bonds here? About 10 merchants raised their hands. I got it because they said it offered high interest. When I went to open a deposit, they encouraged me to get this. Last time I was there, the staff recommended it as a good option. Most of the merchants were elderly, having operated in the market for decades. They likely had no idea what a subordinated bond was and simply signed on because the bank employee said it was a good deal. You can only get your money back if the bank is stable until maturity. If it goes bankrupt earlier, you won't receive a single penny. The merchants were taken aback by that statement. What does that mean? Why can't we get compensation? Isn't there something called the deposit protection law? Park Yong-cheol replied with exasperation. The deposit protection law only applies to deposits, not bonds. Subordinated bonds are just as risky as stocks. Kim Soon-rai grasped Park Yong-cheol's shoulders as if to shake him. What happens to my money then? 86 million won might seem like a small amount to some. But Park Yong-cheol, who had worked in the same market, knew better than anyone how Kim Soon-rai had saved that money. Well, if bank resume operations, there shouldn't be a problem. What if not? I mean, what happens if the bank can't open? He couldn't bring himself to say anything, and Kim Soon-rai collapsed onto the spot as if she had fainted. Newsbreak displayed videos on its website and YouTube channels. As an online media outlet, it might usually have been overshadowed by mainstream media, but this time was different. The entire nation's attention was already focused on the Hosong Savings Bank situation, resulting in a surge in visitor numbers. Jin Yojin, the CEO, and Jo Woo-jin, the reporter, spoke in front of the camera as if hosting a radio show. Jin Yojin was the first to speak. We've prepared a special feature on President vs. Otaku Part 2. As everyone knows, this situation arose due to comments made by Kang Jin-hoo, the CEO of OTK Company. He has also been questioned as a suspect by the prosecution a few days ago. Jo Woo-jin nodded. If he had simply stated that there were suspicions about insolvency, it might have passed without much attention. But he outright said to withdraw money from Hosong Savings Bank. If the insolvency is not clarified, there's a possibility he could be arrested. So depending on the outcome, either Kang Jin-hoo might be arrested, or Hosong Savings Bank could go bankrupt. One of the two. Personally, I'd prefer that Kang Jin-hoo be wrong because the impact on ordinary citizens would be tremendous if Hosong Savings Bank goes under. Exactly. Hosong Savings Bank is currently the second largest in the savings bank sector. If things go wrong, it could lead to a regional economic collapse. Before we move on to the main news, I have the prospectus for the subordinated bonds sold by Hosong Savings Bank. If you look here, it clearly states that the interest rate is 5.6% per year. The interest is to be paid quarterly at 1.4%, and it includes information on the issuance amount, date, maturity, and subscription unit. The important part is at the very end. Jin Yojin held up the prospectus to the camera. At the bottom there was tiny text that was barely readable. You probably can't see it at all. In fact, I can't see it well either. The text is less than 1 millimeter and you'd need a magnifying glass to read it. Anyway, it states that subordinated bonds have a lower repayment priority than ordinary bonds, so please be aware. This bond is not protected by the Depositor Protection Act, and the risk of failure to repay principal and interest falls on the investor. Do you know what this means? Jo Woo-jin explained. Hosong Savings Bank can return up to 50 million won per person even in the event of bankruptcy. If the bank runs out of money, the Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation is obligated to cover that amount. So, if you deposited 80 million won, you would lose 30 million won but still receive 50 million won. However, subordinate bonds don't have such protection. If the bank goes under, that's it. You might not get a single penny back. But these scoundrels, I mean the employees of Hosong Savings Bank, sold these to customers even the day before closing. If someone had financial knowledge and understood what subordinate bonds were, I could understand. But most purchasers are elderly. They think these are similar to regular deposits. When selling financial products, customers must be adequately informed about the product's basics and investment risks. This is highly likely to be a case of incomplete selling. Subordinate bonds are a problem, but there's an even more crucial issue at hand. Before diving into the specifics, let's summarize the situation. The first statement from Kang Jin-hoo came around 7 p.m. At that point, the bank had already closed. Shocked customers tried to access online banking to withdraw their money, but the site and app crashed within 10 minutes due to a surge of users. After that, access was completely denied. Jo Woo-jin nodded. It should be viewed that Hosong Savings Bank blocked access to prevent an online bank run. So the next morning, customers rushed to the bank, but it had just opened and then closed again, entering a suspension of operations. Ordinary customers barely managed to retrieve their deposits. Jin Yojun looked at the camera and said, "Now here's the crucial point. What happened between Kang Jin-hoo's statement and the next morning? We have obtained some shocking information. It will surprise you."